So how can I put my Access database online? Or more specifically, how can I design my Access database so that it works well and goes online so that my users can access it from anywhere with an internet connection and Microsoft Access installed? I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie, and today that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to design our Access databases so that they work well on Azure. We're going to use an Azure database today, and Azure SQL database, I should say. And we're going to talk about design considerations, and I'm going to show you one or two gotchas that you have to remember when you're using your code on your DAO objects and stuff like that. And we're going to go through the entire process of creating a database, creating some tables on the database using SQL Server Management Studio, and then we're going to take our Access front end and we're going to code a simple form with a couple of functions to sort of demonstrate how to get past the gotchas and get your Access database online. So without further ado, let's get to our Access on Azure SQL. Looking to hire resources for your project? Make sure to check out the links in the description. Okay, so in order to complete this project, you are going to need an account, and once you get yourself an Azure account, you'll see some options here, and the one that we're going to look for is SQL databases, and we're going to hit that create button there, and that's going to start us on our process of creating a database on Azure that we can use for our project. Now what I'm going to do is I want to sort of do everything here because you'll probably go through each of these. You're going to create a new resource group. I created a test one there, but I'm going to create another resource group, and the resource group is kind of like where you put everything that your project is going to use together in one spot. That's your resource group. And then after we've created our new resource group there as part of this, we're going to specify a database name, and I'm just going to put our name in as project timesheet here. And now you'll note I did select new server there because we do need to create a server for our database, because the server is going to hold your database plus any other databases that you might want to add to that server, so you can have many databases on your server. And so we're going to create a database server at the same time as part of this sort of creation process, and it's going to create this entire, it'll create the server and then the database on the server, and then you can add more databases later without creating a new server each time. Now you'll be asked to select a location for your server, and in my case I can choose US West 2, and now there's many different ways here. I might go in further detail in upcoming videos, but today we're going to use just the SQL authentication, which is the simplest of them. It's just basically a username and password, and we'll take a look at the other ones and in other videos where you have more advanced security that you might want to have. You could use Azure Azure Active Directory and stuff like that. So now you can see we're creating our database server. We created a login for the server, our server admin login, and as part of that, the database is going to get created as well. And the server got created, and now we can finish up the SQL database part of it. So now we've got a server, and now we're saying create our project timesheets database on that server, and we can configure that. Now you should take a look at the compute and storage. You don't really need Elastic Pool to start, I think, and probably if you're looking for the cheapest possible option to get started, it's going to be serverless, which will be a certain amount per month, but it won't be massive unless you've got huge throughput on your database. So this is a pretty small one, and see some more detail about it here if you go into the configuration part of it. But basically, if you choose the serverless, it will scale automatically. You can see this is you know, $6 a month Canadian, and you know, it's got a pretty low you know, amount of power on it, but it's probably more than enough for ours. You can see the auto pause there. If you want it to pause processing when nobody accesses it for a long time, you can set that and some other settings. Now for network connectivity, in this case you can say no access, connection policy, just use the default, and then leave the defaults for that stuff. If you want Defender, you can get it, but basically this is all pretty much defaults now, and you can add some tags and things if you want to on the next screen there. Generally speaking, the collation will be the same. And so you get to the end of it here, and it's sort of like review, all of your options, and then you can go ahead and create that database. And that's going to get us started. So this is great. So everything looks good. We'll hit create, and that's going to give us a deployment in progress message, which will go on for a while. I've called this one, like I said before, it's Access Demo Server. And it's creating that, it's deploying that server, as we speak. And sometimes it might take a while for it to get deployed, but generally speaking, you'll get it pretty quick. And so you'll see some messages in the top right, usually popping up. Oh, there we go. It's deployment is complete. And so once you're done there, and your database has been deployed, you've got a server, you've got a database, you'll see it in your messages if you click on the bell that it was deployed, and you can click on Go to Resource, and that's going to take you to your database, because there's a few things that we need to do before we start creating tables and stuff like that, because we want to access this using our SQL Server Management Studio. So we're going to go to the server name and click on it in the when we're in our database there. And what we want to do, we can see our database there, the project timesheets is the database, and we've sort of clicked on the server. So now we're looking at the server overall view, and we're going to click on Show Firewall Settings. And what we want to do here, now if you had some other stuff like an Azure App Service, an ASP thing, you would click on the Allow App Azure Services and stuff like that, but we don't need to do that. The only thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a rule in our firewall, and you need to find your IP address, because this is where you can allow your IP through, and anybody else is going to use your database. So you can open it up pretty wide, as wide as you want, but generally in case when you're first getting started, just open up your own IP address and say save, and then once you save it, you'll get a message back like you just saw there, and now your IP address has access to the Azure SQL database. And once you've got that one, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our database again. Now if you ever get lost, you can check that tree at the top, and you can go up and down the tree. It's like a map to where you are. In this case, now we're going to look at our database, and now we're going to go Show Database Connection String. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us the methods of connecting. That one's for ADO.NET, JDBC, ODBC, PHP, and Go. And we're going to use ODBC because Microsoft Access works really awesome with ODBC. So you can use the little copy icon there to get your connection string into the clipboard, and then you can paste it into Notepad or whatever, because we're gonna use that here very soon. And I've got SQL Server Management Studio going here, but just before I get started, I'll grab Notepad and I'll just paste that in so I don't forget our connection string. So there you go, that's our connection string. This one's specifying ODBC driver 13. And you can see it's got all different kinds of information. In this case, we can get our our server name out of there, which is the access demos server.database.windows.net. And so we're going to copy that because we're going to use that in SQL Server Management Studio, which you can download for free. That's what you see right now. And when you open that server, you're going to see this connect to server pop-up box, and you can put in your server name and your demo admin because we created that user when we created the database, and your password. And then what you're going to see is you'll see something like this, and this is a tree in the top left here, and this is what SQL Server Management Studio looks like. It's very, very handy. Now you can see if I open up my database, you'll see there's no tables in there yet, but we're going to remedy that by adding some very simple tables. Now you'll click on New Query on the toolbar, but make sure that before you do that, first you click on Project Timesheets in the tree, and then click on New Query so that it puts you in the right context. And now SQL Server Management Studio has sort of a context thing there where you need to make sure that you're running your SQL on the right database and stuff. So always make sure you click on your database first and then open your query. You can also change it in the top left. You see where it says Project Timesheets. You can change which database that you're looking at, but make sure that you know where you're doing it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create some tables, and this is part of the process. And what we want to do is we want to create tables that are really good at working with Access. Now I have a certain way that I can see how it works well with Access, and particularly with DAO. So we're going to create some SQL Server tables, and we'll use the create table statement like you can see here, create table person, and then inside the brackets we put all of our column names, and we're going to use that person ID integer not null that you see on the top, and then it specifies identity 11, which means that it's an auto number. It's like an access auto number. And then the primary key clustered means that all the key is going to stay in the same place, and it's going to be ordered right where it, sort of like where it's stored. And so that is exactly how access auto number works. And so that's why this is why I use this one, because when we do our linked tables, as you'll see later in the project, that key is going to be very important, because that's very, very similar to using auto numbers as our synthetic key in Microsoft Access DAO, like our normal projects. And so we can use our nvarchar data type. That's your short text. If you do an nvarchar max, that's your memo, because when we link our tables, the data types that you see here are going to be translated to Access data types, and it works almost seamlessly. It's really awesome. So we'll create another table for project. We'll create the auto number key just the same way as we did in the person example, and then we'll create a table for our project sort of time, where we're going to record people's time on projects. This is a very simple example. So this is kind of like a junction table where we're going to record all of the different times that people worked on different projects, and this is we're doing it on Azure SQL so that it works very well with our Access database front end. So you can also create, if you want to, you can create foreign keys and cascading updates and deletes and all that other stuff too. That's a little advanced for today if we're just trying to create something from scratch. So what we'll do is we're just going to make a very simple set of tables. As you can see in project time, I've got a time ID. Again, it's our auto number. I'll grab our person ID, which is the integer of the person ID of the person in the first table. I'll put the project ID as the second foreign key there, and then I will do like a date worked, when did they work, and the hours worked. We'll just put that in as a decimal, and I'll just put say, I don't know, 17.2. That's probably way more than they could work in a day, but anyway, that'll work for now. And you'll see how that gets translated when we link the tables later. So that decimal will become an access decimal. And then our work comment, again, if you want to have a memo field, you use that nvarchar max. And if you like, you can put a go at the end of your script, and you hit F5, and that's going to create all those tables on your server. Now you'll see they don't show up here, so you're wondering what's going on. You have to right click and refresh in SQL Server Management Studio every time you make changes to your tables and all that stuff. So make sure you right click and refresh so that you get the latest list, and you can see those 3 tables were created just fine. And then once our tables are created, we can jump over to Microsoft Access, and we'll create a blank database here, and I'll just call it timesheets or whatever. And then you hit your create button, and just like whenever you start Access, you've got a new table there, and you can get rid of that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go create ribbon and then module, and then that'll give us, you'll see this little IDE here, this development environment, and I'll hit save, and we'll call this mod main. Now all I'm going to put in here is I'm just going to put a little procedure that's going to link our database tables directly to the Azure SQL backend without using a DSN, needing a DSN file, because I prefer not to do it that way. So I'm going to grab that whole string that we saved in our notepad file there. I'm just going to paste that as a new variable. We created a string for connection, and as you can see, there's our connection. You know, it's got a bunch of stuff in there. You can see this here now. It's not recommended to put your password into the string. You can, which will make it seamless, and it won't prompt users when you first start up the application. But it can be fished out. The password can be fished out, so you might want to leave that blank there. But basically what we'll do today is we'll show how to create the linked tables automatically here. And if you make any changes to your SQL Server tables, you can delete them out of Access here, because those are just links. They're not actual tables when you see them in Access. And then you can just run this little procedure again, and it'll just relink them with all your changes. So here's we're going to use transfer database, so we'll go do command transfer database, AC link, ODBC is the type. We'll put in the connection, the strcnn for the connection. That's that big one up above. And then we got our table names. It's the source and the destination, and in this case we want them to be the same in the same name as they are on the server. Yeah. When we look at them in Access, although you can change it, you could give it an alias if you want, by changing that second project or person there, as you can see. And what we're going to do on our connection string is we're going to add ODBC onto the beginning of that. That's actually a translation for Microsoft Access. It likes to see that ODBC as part of the arguments. And you'll see when I hit run on that, you'll see it gives me a login failed because I didn't specify the password. So it's going to ask me 3 times, once for each of the tables, and it only does this at the time that you link it. So yeah, I'll have to put in my password, because I said, hey, let me into this server using demo admin, but without a password. So it says, what is the password? And so now we've got 3 tables linked in our project, and we don't have any DSN, so we could just give this project or this Access database to somebody else. They don't have to have the DSN files on their computer and all that stuff. And as you can see, there's 3 empty tables. And the beautiful thing is, those tables act like native DAO tables. So when you open them and you want to add some information into them, it's just like you're looking at Access tables. They work almost identically in the Access interface to your Access tables, which means that you can create your project. Once you've created all your tables and stuff, you can create your project just as you would as if you're programming it on native Access database tables, except you're programming it on Azure tables. And they're designed in a way that works really well with Access. You'll see I can just start typing into that row there, and I can, it recognizes that it's a date field just like, in Access, and I can type some stuff in there, and that's very, very handy, and it works just the way that you would expect it to. And there is a gotcha which is coming up that if you have any code in your solution, then I'm going to give you a little heads up on what you need to do in order to make your code. It's very, very simple. There's one thing that you need to do when you open and modify data using your record sets and stuff like that. So what I'll do is I'll just use a wizard here, and on our project timetable, that's our junction table, where we record people against time, and it's a many-to-many. So I'll just create a tabular form, and I'll go ahead and I'll just keep the default options, and I'll just call it project time form, and then I'll say finish, and now you can see, wow, okay, now I've got a form that's working on an Azure database. And I'm going to be able to go in and make some design changes. Now these are IDs, if you remember correctly, because of we were using that synthetic ID for person ID. So I'll just go ahead and I'll change that to a combo box so that it gets the ID number, but it looks, when you look at it, it looks at the person's name. And so we'll click the ellipsis beside the record source there, or the row source, and then I'll just grab last name. I guess I'll make it a concatenation, and I'll say, person, and then it'll be last name, ampersand, comma, first name, something like that. And then we'll also, we'll grab that person ID and we'll drag it down to be the first column. So it'll give us the ID and then our name, so that we can use that in our drop down box. So I'll do that. I'll close that. You say yes to save it. Now we've got an ID and a name, and what we'll do is we'll check that bound column is 1. That's the ID, so that's what the data is going to be that it gets out of this combo box. And then we'll say column count 2, and we'll put column widths 0 and 2, and then and I guess I'll say 3. It might be a little bit wider than that, so I'll just say 3 centimeters, and then I'll make the list width 3 centimeters just for demonstration here, and then I'll do the same thing for a project ID. I'll go in, we'll grab that. We'll grab that, or first we'll change it to a combo box, and then we'll get that row source, and we'll go into the ellipsis and grab the project just like we did on our previous one. And we'll this one's easy, just grab the project ID and the project name, and we'll sort it descending by project, and we'll save that. And now we've got 2 combo boxes that have the data that we want in them. We'll sort the last name ascending, last name and first name, and then now if we go ahead and check that out on our form view, we should see some values in there. So there's our names, and then that looks like our project ID. So that's our bound column. So it's looking at the IDs and not the names. So bound column is 1, and we want to set that to 2 columns, and then we need to set some widths for the columns. So we'll say 0 for the first one, because that's it's just a number that doesn't mean anything to the user. And then we'll say 3 centimeters and make the list width 3 centimeters, and then we can go back to our view here. So now you can see, there we go. We can choose the bridge project, and it's going to put the ID into the table instead of the name, which is really good, because if the bridge project ever gets changed to the crossing river project name, you don't have to change the ID or go back and change all your records. You can just change it in one table, and that's one of the beautiful things of normalizing your data. you can just change it in one place. Now, as you can see, this is really great because now we've got an online database. I could give this data file to anybody and they could be working on it concurrently, throwing in records and things like that and making changes. And the changes, if there are conflicts, those will get they'll be propagated out to the client, and so you'll have to resolve conflicts if two people change the record at the same time. That's all handled via ODBC. And so I'll change this, make this look a little bit better. I'll move my my title up, and then say I wanted to get some more space. Well, I could grab those, move those over, and I could expand the the fields that have some select data in them, and I can move those over, and they might look a little bit. You could show a bit more, or you could stack them, put one on top of the other in that empty space that you see in the bottom left there. But you could spend hours doing all that kind of stuff. And but the main thing is that this form is now working on Azure, which is really great, and it's going to allow us to deploy this solution, out to as many users as we want. You can create all kinds of stuff. You can lock it down according to however you lock your Access databases down, and you can use Azure Active Directory, so that those kinds of things. So you can have more advanced security if you want. But this works just like DAO, which is awesome. DAO being, most of the stuff in Access, all the forms and everything, and your record sets generally are using DAO. And so this works pretty much natively on these three tables that you see here. Now, if you are using ADO, you probably already know how to use connection strings and things like that. But your Azure database will also work with ADO record sets. You just use it as if you were connecting to SQL Server, and that'll give you your record sets. And so now what we can do is, if we wanted to show some coding, what we could do is we'll go to the design of our form here. And I'm just going to throw on a button here because we're going to do a little bit of coding. I guess I'll put it over on the right here. I'll just cancel that, and then we'll give it a name. I'll put new project on there, and then I'll give it a name in the other tab in the properties. I'll call it CMD new project. So if I click on that instead of command 11, I'll say CMD new project, and then we'll also add. I'll go ahead and add a. I'm going to add a text box that we can use just for a demonstration here for a new project name. So this is because what we want to do is we want to show how your coding is going to work, because when you open your DAO record sets in VBA, when you're using Azure SQL in the back end, there's a couple little changes you need to make compared to how you usually would open those record sets and do things like add and update. And so what we'll do here is we'll click on our new project button, and we'll go to the event tab, and we're going to click on click, and then we're going to select the code builder there and then go OK, and that's going to give us an event that we can code for the click. And so what we'll do is we'll add a comment at the top just saying checks for, and then adds a new project, and then we can just say dim DB as database. We'll get a DAO record set as RST, and then we'll get our project, which we're going to grab from that text box, I suppose, and that's on the form. And then we'll just say our project is equal to an empty string concatenated with what's in there. So if there's a null in there, it'll make it into an empty string for you. and then we'll say if the length of the project is equal to 0, then well, that's not equal. Let's go back, and it is equal to 0, then just get out of this subroutine. So we'll just say exit sub. So what that'll do is if it's empty, then it won't do anything. But if we put an entry in, what we're going to do here is we're going to open a record set, and we're going to do a find first on the record set to say, hey, is this guy in here already, or this project in here already? And then if we don't find a match, then we're going to insert that, or we're going to use our record set, and we're going to do the use the add method, and it's going to add it to the record set. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open this record set. We're just going to open it on the table, and as you can see, I've added this argument on the end called DBC changes, which is very, very important for when you're coding for your new Access database, or if you're converting your existing Access database over to use Azure SQL tables, because the DBC changes will allow your record sets to see the changes as they happen. That has to do with the ID columns that are auto-generated and all those kind of things. So the Dynaset needs it. You can get away without using DBC changes on your snapshots. Now the snapshot type is DB open snapshot, and that is a non-updatable record set, which might actually be a little bit faster if you're looking things up in the database, but just be aware of that DBC changes. So what we'll do is we'll say RST find first, and then we're gonna, oh yeah, we don't need brackets in, I'm used to my .NET coding, so we're gonna say rst.find first, project name equals, and then our project, and then we'll say if rst.nomatch, then we'll go ahead and add new. So we'll do an rst.add new, and then we'll say rst exclamation for referencing the field. We'll say project name is equal to the project on our new record set, and then we'll say rst.update. And as you know, that auto number in the background, we don't have to insert the ID key because it's automatically generated. And we used a data type that's like the type that we use in our auto numbers, and Access works really well with that. Now this is just me, I'll put a with and end with around this to make it a little bit neater. So you can use with, so you can say with RST, and then if you have code that has, a million, you use the same variable name a million times, you can reduce the amount by using the with statement. And so there we go. With RST, find first. If you don't find it, put it into the table. We're using our DBC changes, so that's going to work for us. And then we're using an add new and update. And what we could do is we could add a message box saying added. So there we go. We have some feedback, and then we could do else. So if it's not .no match, which means that it did find a match, then we could say, message box, this project already exists, or something like that. And then that's going to give some feedback to the user to say, hey, you need to go and find that, that project already exists, so don't try to add that again. And that will be very handy. So now if I open our form here and I type in, if I type in a project and I go, I type in baseball field project, and then, if I go new project, and that I broke it already, so let's go see. So you hit debug, and then I can see, it looks like I'll stop it, and it looks like I used the wrong table name. So we're actually adding to the project table and not the project time table. So I'll minimize that, and now if I hit new project, there you go, it says added, and there we go. So now if I try to hit it again, for that, it says, well, that already exists because I just put that in. And there you go, that project already exists. And so, so what that demonstrates is that change with using DBC changes, you do want to start to use specifying DB open snapshot and DB open dynaset for dynaset is for updatable record sets. Snapshots is for things that you don't need to update. You should, if you're not using those now, you should start to use those, and those will definitely make your database more efficient. And DBC changes works very well with Open Dynaset, and that's one of the things you need to know for getting your database online with Azure. And so now what you can see is, I've got this great little form here that I could spend a whole bunch of time to make it look pretty and maybe a little bit nicer for the user. But the idea is that now there's this form. It's working as an Access database. It's online. It can be accessed from just about anywhere, and it's pretty much exactly the same as my other Access projects. It works in the same way, and so it's very comfortable for coding, using DAO and all that stuff. But what if I reopen the database? What does it look like? And so you can see I reopened it there, and it gave me the warning. And if I double click this time form, you can see, oh, it's kind of remembered part of it. And so we do need to type in our database username and password, but we only have to do it once. And then for the entire time we're using the database, however many tables you have, it's going to work just fine. And that is sort of how that light security works. Now, there is a way that you can put the password into the, if I hover over this, you can see it's got the connection string in there. And there is a way to do the DSN-less connection, and you can actually save the password into the string so that it's seamless and it just opens for the user with no problem. But be aware that that can be hacked. You can fish out that password, and so it might not be as secure as if you just let them log in, or if you use Azure SQL or something like that, or you might have some other ways that you secure your databases. Because you can look at the connection string here. We don't have the username and password in here, but if it was stored in here, then I could actually retrieve it from this string here. In this case, it's not stored in there, and so that's fine. And that is how you can design your database to work well with Microsoft Azure SQL so that your database can be online and available for all of your users from anywhere that they have an internet connection and Microsoft Access. Hope you enjoyed today's discussion on how to get your Access database onto Azure SQL so that your users can access it from anywhere. If you like what you saw today, please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the bell when you see the bell, and if you have any questions or comments, put those in the comment section below. Have a great day, have a safe day, and I'll catch you next time. Need help or coaching on your project? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description.